Hello, happy Monday. Welcome to HR Huddle. Hi, Jen.
Hey, Tamera.
We've had a couple weeks off with the 4th of July and the celebration of Jen's mom's life last week. So we are glad to be back with you today. And we've had kind of a squirrely day. And I think one of the things that we have been talking about is just embracing all the differences on our team. And specifically, we were with this great, smart, fun, fantastic, generative group of seniors and supervisors in our senior and supervisor program. And we were talking about communications. And then before that, Samantha and I were with another group, and we were talking about understanding personality differences. And we had a few operations people on that webinar, and they were just talking about how they are different than maybe the traditional, CPA or partner, your typical, CPA preference. And how do we embrace those differences, and how do we, figure out how to navigate our relationships and our communications, and, be more effective with those diverse teams and have it be a good thing instead of a "you're not like me, you're doing it wrong" kind of thing, or "you're irritating me" kind of thing, because you're doing it differently or maybe thinking about things differently. So we thought maybe we'd just, spend a little bit of time today, just talking about specifically like where do you as HR professionals fit in, but then also broadening it to how do we, help our team members embrace that diversity. So anything else from a setup perspective, Jen, before we kind of jump into some ideas that we might have?
Well, just that communications isn't necessarily something that our public accounting, brothers and sisters went to school for. I like to say that there are some of us that think about words and we're wordies and we're playing Wordle, and we're thinking about words that diminish and words that inspire, and that's not usually our public accounting friends. They like numbers more than they like words necessarily, and they like deliverables, and they're focused on, really the production of good financial outcomes for their clients. And yes, they have to communicate to do that. It's impossible to be successful with clients or with staff in the work without good communication, but we didn't go to school for it necessarily. And because of that, our HR folks that might be tuning in, or other leaders, it's on us to figure out how to bring good communications best practices and tips and did you knows, and sort of heighten people's awareness to communications. And so we have to forgive that our organization isn't awesome at corporate communications or individual communications. Get over that and recognize that that's a role we could play. And then later, as our firms grow, we should have a full-time person who's responsible for communications. And that's a wonderful expert to bring in at some point. So that's just something I would put in the background there, because it's very easy for us to sort of point out all the places we stink at it. I don't know that would help, really.
Right. So, I think that's a good point. And I think that's one thing that we can always do. So it could feel like cumbersome to say, okay, now I have to be responsible for communications. And yes, in the HR role we do. Yes, in marketing we do. Yes, in operations we do. But it's a gift if we start asking the question, who needs to know what by when? And let's just start with that simple question every time we meet, every time we're executing on something, that who does this message need to go out to? And think about really the cascade of communications. We were all taught that somewhere back in a communications class. The stakeholders, who needs to know first, and then who, and what's that trickle down effect, and at what point, when do they need to know it, and then who's delivering that communication. And as much as possible, have that communication be as consistent as possible. And that's some of the thinking in planning we could do. That might be a place where we get frustrated, is like, I was in that meeting. That is not what I heard. Now there's 4 different messages going out there. Or I have people in my office asking about the new benefits change, and that is not what we said, because we don't have consistent, answers. Or, maybe we're doing a merger, or maybe we're doing, performance reviews different. And just thinking about what those messages are, and asking that question so that we can anticipate it and then assign it. And if you do that throughout the organization, oh my gosh, you will be reduce so much churn, and you'll be so much more consistent in your message, and you'll get more done because of it. Your people will be on message. It will be huge.
Yes. So where you are, I'm going to kind of keep following that thread for a few minutes. Who needs to know what by when? Even above that is what's happening or changing and what's not. Like what's changing and what's not. And the answer to that is usually something called a position statement. So, we have acquired a firm in city X. You know, why? Here's why we thought they would be a fit. Here are our plans for what is going to change as a result of that. Here's what is not changing. And then who needs to know in what order?
Yes.
So obviously, almost always, we have to have senior leadership first. If you have a board, executive committee, management committee, they have to buy in to whatever the change might be. Then maybe department heads, and then your partner group or shareholder group needs to know. Right behind them, the principals, managers, senior managers, because staff go to them to ask. So if they're not cascaded early, then they get questions and they don't have answers, and they feel like maligned or something that we blew them off and didn't include them.
Yes.
So like who gets told in what order, and then what tools will we use? How will we tell them what modes of communication? Are we having a company-wide meeting? Are we going to do a video call? Are we going to do a video and just record it and then give everybody a link to it? Are we going to have a frequently asked questions document? Will there be part of the intranet that will have more information on it? Is there a press release?
All the above.
And the press usually get told somewhere in that cascade of communications, hopefully after the staff, but right after, right? So because the minute staff know, everybody will know sooner or later. So thinking that through, when do we tell clients? And what's the message to them about what's changing or not changing? And not just our clients, but if we were merging in that firm, using my example, their clients are wondering what's changing and what's not changing. And so thinking that through and helping with what's called positioning, thinking about objections that people have, concerns, issues. I taught a class last week on change communications to a bunch of new partners, year 1, 2, or 3 as partners. And we were talking about promotions and pay raises and how like horribly communicated they are, and how little people involve like the young partners. So like HR's talking to, the management committee or the department heads or something, and they're making decisions maybe to do some midterm adjustments for people that in a salary study showed up not making market or better. But it's not everybody at that level, and it's not everybody in that department, and it's a mid-year thing. So it's just a spot thing, but who's getting it? Why are they getting it? And I use the example where, we're going to give midterm salary adjustments, market adjustments to 4 people out of a 12-person group at that level. 4 of them are under market. And so Tamera and I split up going out and telling them, but nobody helps us before we tell them. They just say, here, go tell these people about these raises. So Tamera goes out and says, hey, we did this market study. We are doing a market adjustment. This isn't performance-based. There'll still be a review of your raise like everybody else salaries later at our normal time. I go out and say, you've done such a great job. Good job. High five. Here's a raise. And so then my people leave that I talk to, and they go tell their friends, I got a raise. And she said I did a great job. And then they're like, why didn't I get a raise? And so then all of a sudden the message is a mess. And who handles it when the message is a mess, Tamera? Who do they go to?
They go to their peers, they go to the HR professional, or they go to their career coach who, oh, by the way, we didn't tell them we were having this conversation with them.
Yeah, HR though. I was thinking, so sometimes HR is like, I don't want to do internal communications. Do you know how busy I am? And I'm like, yeah, I do. But aren't you really busy handling all the employee relations issues that are being generated by terrible communications? So,
you can reduce that amount of time and actually have it be better if you manage the communications,
or at least make sure to influence them. And And we love it if marketing manages it each also, as long as somebody's walking through the process to make sure, and maybe not every internal communication, like, we're closing early this Friday or something. Maybe that's okay that somebody else just wings that one, but the big ones, we really need to manage better.
But even those simple ones, and it's a good thing, gosh, we could mess up those simple things if we don't think about it. And our office is closed, but your office isn't, and we didn't coordinate it, and it's ridiculous. I know it sounds so simple, but I do think it's important for us to pay attention to, those messages and make sure we're on point. And that, like in your example of the, market increases, the leadership team needs to know it. They need to be on message. Their mentor or infirm coach or career advisor, whatever your title is you're using, they have to know. That's a complaint we often get. I'm sure you heard it from those new partners. It's like, I didn't even know. They come and ask me about it, and I didn't even know they got a raise. I'm blindsided. I don't know how to articulate that. We hear that over and over again. And not just about like that topic, but on different topics or decisions that get made, and newer partners or managers, that the staff is going to go ask those questions of those people, weren't in the loop, and they just feel very embarrassed and lack confidence. And how do I address that? I have to go check. I have to go, figure it out. And they're like, "Why aren't you my manager?" So we want to identify what that is.
Yes,
it's important.
Well, and I was just thinking about like the mode of communication too, and how we can screw that up in such a big way, dropping like big messages into full inboxes. And, I think you might remember that there was, back in 2008, 2009, during the staff reductions, let's say 2009, 2010, there started to be some staff reductions due to pretty good downturn. And this was before all the baby boomers had retired. So there was this thing called, that we don't even know what this is in HR, but it's called overstaffing. And it was just a temporary blip, by the way, like 6 months or something. But some firms like put out an email to tell about a layoff, which was just like, we were horrified, like, you don't give bad news in email. You don't give really big change news in email if you can help it. Even if you did something like this using StreamYard or another tool, and you recorded it on Zoom or something, you did a side-by-side where somebody on your team interviews the managing partner and says, "So, tell us the news," and they tell the news, and then, "Why are we doing this? And why is this a good thing for us? And what's changing? What's not changing?" And it's not scripted, so it's not contrived or dorky or, overly to the letter of the words, but it's more like conceptually, we've agreed on our answers to these FAQs. We're going to record them, and then we're going to make an announcement to the team, and we're going to say, "Hey, watch this recording." And then we're going to hold a call directly following, so you'll have an hour or two once the recording's available to stream it. And then let's have a chat, and you can ask your questions. We'll give you a question queue to type them in. You can vote each other's questions up so that the top questions get our focus in the town hall or whatever you want to call it. But there's lots of cool technology to use these days that can have us really be connected and related and really converse on it and get our message across. That's so much better than like a short email or a long email or, just the press release, and that's all I get, and what's on our website,
Well, and I think we need a combination of all those communications. Excuse me. And because that's part of that communication preference difference. I might like video, and you might like to read it. You'd prefer to read it, and you might digest it differently. And also to talk it through with me. Some people prefer that. It's like, yeah, okay, I'll read it, but I want to talk through it. That's how they're going to absorb it. And we're not going to hit everybody with the same mode of communication. So they're going to respond differently to other, modes. And so we have to communicate more than once. Now we can leverage all that. You're not recreating the wheel with all that. The interview or the fireside chat or whatever it is, your live stream like this, I can take the key points that were responded to and put it into an FAQ and send out an email. And that could be part of the link, by the way. It also could be on our intranet or on Teams. It could also be incorporated into our positioning into the press release. So all of that is leverageable, but we do have to think about, multiple and frequent modes of communication. We always talk about there's, the law of 7 in communications. We have to say something 7 times. And oh, by the way, you only get half of it. So it's 14 times before it's absorbed and able to be articulated back or acted on. And so we have to, identify what those multiple ways of communicating are.
Yes, definitely. Well, and we talked about communication. That's sort of the big map of communication, but then there's the small, like daily communications, right? So what we were just talking about is what you might call broader corporate communications,
Yes.
ideas.
Yes.
Most of us could improve the short game, small communications too, and we talked about some of the pitfalls in our session that we taught today, the seniors and supervisors. And, one is just paying attention to meeting facilitation. So if I'm in HR and I have the honor of facilitating focus groups, I get to get groups together for feedback, or I have been asked to run our firm's remote and hybrid change management group, and we're going to create a how we work document. Or HR gets all these wonderful chances to facilitate, and there are communication pitfalls that happen. One is allowing dominators to dominate at the table or in the room, and so we know who the people are that are fastest on their feet, have the most words, maybe the most power, folks that have a lot of positioning power. That I'm the highest ranking official in the room. Those people all should be asked to go last as part of facilitation. You don't let dominators or people with big power positions. Once the power person speaks, no one else will contradict, usually. Not always, but often. So you put yourself in kind of a bad situation if you really want to elicit honest feedback, or if you really want to brainstorm ideas or something, letting that person lead. When we do vision planning and that sort of stuff, we'll tell the managing partner or the executive committee, speak last and hardly at all. You're listening. You're paying attention. You're observing. We'll have breaks. You can tell us what you're wondering, what you would like to, suss out of the group, or what you'd like us to ask, or whatever, because we want to keep the rest of the group feeling like it's their meeting, and not shut down. So that's the dominating one. And there were a few other facilitation ideas that we had, Tamera.
Well, on the flip side of that, we can just go there. The opposite is those that don't speak up or they're quiet. Get them information and identify what the agenda is so that they can prepare if there's anything they can read in advance so they can process it first. That is always helpful. Also, let them know, especially like if it's a focus group, I expect to hear from every single one of you. So we are going to go around and I'm going to ask for input. Let them know that up front, and just, say, there was ideas. It was so great. They generated, 50 storm chats, in the chat function, but you could, have them do some small group paired share and then come back and talk. That we could have them, identify, ways to, I could chat. That is one of the ways that I could communicate and speak up. But often we want people to speak live, and we need to tell them we expect them to speak live, and then facilitate making that happen, and setting up the big dogs. Emily's out here saying big dogs go last. Yes, I wrote a blog on that. We should include it, Caroline. And Jen wrote one on that communications plan and strategy. We should include that as well. Or people can message us if you want a copy of those. But I think that's so important to set that up as much as possible in advance. And you have an idea of who those people are already. So, we can go to them in advance and say, hey, this is what we expect in this meeting. So.
Well, and when we facilitate leadership programs, we get kind of a mix. We get the people in between who will kind of participate, the people who are almost mute, and the people who we can't get to be quiet. And it's our job to facilitate all three so that at the end, everybody feels like they had about the same amount of airtime. And for the people who prefer to be mute, they think that's exhausting, and we've really done something kind of mean to them. And yet we can't know them. We say you can't lead without communicating. You can't lead without speaking. Your voice has to be heard for people to follow it. And And so getting them in practice on that. And we pay attention. We tell them, like Tamara said up front, every voice will be heard. Every person will communicate in this big room during this time that we're together. So know that we're paying attention. And then somebody on our team is literally doing a tick mark next to people's names as they speak. And as we get toward the afternoon, we'll be like, so Susan, what do you think? And we start to just call them because they haven't done it yet. And maybe they're not gonna, but we're gonna make sure they do. And we warn them, we give them a few warnings, but pretty soon people stop coming to meetings thinking they can hide or they can be quiet.
Right.
And silence, some leaders think, well, they should have spoken up. They must not have any ideas. Their opinions don't matter because they're not voicing them. Their opinions will be the tail that wags your dog outside of the room. They'll go talk to other people one-on-one or in small groups. Just because they're quiet in the big room or at the facilitation table doesn't mean that they agree with what you're doing. It just means they're not going to actively disagree in front of you. So that's on us as leaders to get that disagreement to pop up or to get new ideas or new innovations they would rather see us do. Give them the space to trust the space to speak it out loud. Otherwise, that stuff will work against where we're headed as a group.
And you want to get it out as much as possible. I think the other thing, in our daily communications or in maybe those smaller communications, the other pitfall that we talked about was making sure that we know what the call to action is, not rambling and going on and on, like, telling them this whole big long story or this great big email or like the video recording. It's like, what is the point? Why am I watching this? What is the ask immediately? So we try to say that as soon as possible up front. We're going to talk about the changes and benefits coming this fall, or we're going to talk about the merger that's happening. And we want to be able to tell you what's changing and not changing so that your questions are answered and you feel confident moving forward, whatever it is. In the daily stuff, it could be, I need you to review these so that we can finish our, remote and hybrid guidelines and, how we work documents that we're, publishing and we're updating based on our learning these last 12 months. That's what I'm looking for. So instead of giving like this whole long story, in advance, start with here's the why and here's what I'm looking for, my call to action, and then I can provide supportive information or tell them where to go get it if they want it, because some people don't need it. It's like, just bottom line it for me, and then I can go ahead and make that decision and we can move forward. So I think that's important in our communication. And that's part of what makes it feel hard, is that there's just so much. How do we make it more concise and bottom line it and teach others to do that? Like, put that at the beginning. And a whole bunch of other protocols, how we use email, using the to sign we talked about. Like if it's to Jen, she has an action. If I'm copying Emily, she does not have an action. She can file it. She might still jump in with an opinion or a question, but I don't have an expectation that she's going to do something with it. So establishing some of those protocols, I think, help also, an agreement on how we communicate as a team.
Yeah, creating efficiency, change-making communication, that's what's important. And everybody sort of acts like we all should know. And I'm serious. And then the organization gets bigger and bigger, and we're not morphing the protocols. Not only did we never memorialize them, they're like folklore and, handed down on wood carvings or something from the past, but we never memorialized them. And now we are not updating them as we grow. And we're not orienting people to it. And it becomes this really inefficient, kind of sloppy or messy, expensive process that doesn't get the job done and does sometimes cause more work for us trying to clarify and clean up. So I think just paying attention to how do we communicate? What is our how we work related to communication here? And you could bucket that like email communication, meetings, there's some common buckets of communications and putting those together, teams, protocols, that sort of
documents, all of that. Yeah.
Yep. Awesome.
Yeah. And it is time consuming. And if you can think about, oh my gosh, these are all great ideas, but it's going to take time. You will get time on the back end. There's a saying, and I'll leave you with this. If you don't manage the message, it will manage you. And I think as HR professionals and as managers and as partners, especially in leadership roles, we are often just reacting and, batting down the next communication where we could have anticipated some of that, a lot of it, with some of these communication strategies. And, I love the idea of how we work, communications idea. So hopefully some of these are good ideas for you to go back and implement and try. If you have questions about it, let us know, or you want some of those tools that we talked about, we can send them to you. We look forward to seeing you next week on the next HR Huddle. And if you have topic ideas or requests, anything you're facing this summer, or as you anticipate the fall, you can let us know, shoot us an email, let us know on social media. We'll incorporate those ideas into our planned topics for the future. So thank you very much. Have a great week, and we'll see you next week.
Bye, all.